Hola, bienvenidos a todos y a todas a la Cumbre Virtual de Geometría Sagrada, la estructura de la realidad. Mi nombre es Juan Pablo Uribe, organizador de esta cumbre, y estoy muy feliz y muy honrado de presentar al expositor de hoy. Marshall es productor de proyectos de medios, escritor, músico, diseñador, fotógrafo, autor del libro Cosmometry, Exploring the HoloFractal Nature of Cosmos, o Cosmometría, la exploración de la naturaleza holofractal del cosmos. Es fundador y director del proyecto de Cosmometría, miembro de la junta de Resonance Science Foundation. Se desempeñó como presidente desde el 2006 al 2019, así como co-diseñador y escritor y productor de la Resonance Academy, lanzada en 2014, para la cual continúa sirviendo como profesor adjunto. Se desempeñó como productor asociado del documental Thrive, What on Earth Will It Take?, uno de los documentales independientes más vistos, y es codirector de efectos visuales de Thrive 2, This is What It Takes. Además, les tengo una primicia, que el libro de Cosmometría de nuestro amigo Marshall está siendo traducido al castellano, lo cual va a ser una maravilla para todos ustedes. Muchas gracias, Marshall, de verdad. Estoy muy honrado y muy feliz de tu participación aquí en esta cumbre.
Thank you so much, Marshall, for being here. We're so honored and pleased to have you here.
It is my great pleasure and honor to join you.
Muchas gracias. Y para resumir, porque me llama la atención el nombre de Cosmometría, y yo creo que a mucha gente le llamará la atención de este nombre que quizás no ha sido no ha sido escuchado anteriormente. ¿Qué es la cosmometría, Marshall?
I'm very curious about this concept, cosmometry. Many people may have not heard about it in the past. So the first question is, what is cosmometry?
Yes, it's a good place to start. So I have a long journey of this inquiry into this field of knowledge that, as you well know, as is the name of your whole summit, it's been called sacred geometry for a very long time. I don't know even how long, but certainly long before we used that term in our time here. And in my journey, I began in the 1970s when I became aware that there was a bigger picture to life than I had been aware of before. And one of the initial inspirations that came to me was the work of Buckminster Fuller. And Bucky Fuller was very deeply interested in understanding how nature works and what's the coordinating system that nature uses. And as I'm sure you are aware, he did a lot of study of that and wrote very, very big, thick books called Synergetics, which he called, that's the name of the geometric system that he devised. And that became my first inspiration into this knowledge. And then later, sacred geometry books and that understanding became part of my, what I was learning. And I also had my own inner experiences that had me looking at nature and patterns in nature in different ways and asking questions that I never found answers to when I would read sacred geometry books. So I always had a sort of a sense of a bigger picture than I was getting from the books I was reading, especially influenced by Bucky and my inner experiences. And so in my later years down in my journey, I felt for myself that there was another term that described this field of knowledge that, for me anyway, encompassed a broader inquiry than I was getting through sacred geometry texts. And I just felt for myself, I wanted to know what else could this be called? What other name could be given to it? And one day I was thinking, well, it's not just geometry, it's cosmic in nature. It spans all fractal scales. And the word cosmic geometry came to my mind. And just like geometry is earth, geo, and measuring, this is cosmic measuring, and cosmometry came into my mind. And I thought I had made the word up. It turns out it's been around for a few hundred years, but it's not been in use.
Mira.
Yeah, so I was quite surprised, and so I thought, well, that is an appropriate name for this field. And another reason I wanted to find another name is because I think scientists who are beginning to embrace what we embrace already as a field of knowledge will not use the term sacred geometry as a scientist.
No.
And so, I felt, well, there's another good reason, because I work with scientists who do incorporate this, and there are many others who will, that at least there could be a term that they could use as well. Now, for me, to answer the question, what is cosmometry? I say simply it's the study of the fundamental patterns, structures, processes, principles, and systems that underlie the manifesting reality as we experience it. And for me, again, it includes what, at least at the time when I was thinking about this many years ago, went beyond what I was experiencing in the field of sacred geometry, which included Buckminster Fuller's knowledge, let's say the insights of the physicist David Bohm, who was thinking about the holographic nature of the universe, and really kind of the whole holographic, hologrammic, fractal wholeness and synergetic wholeness. For me, that is like, okay, that's encompassing a bigger field of understanding, and that's what then I call cosmometry.
Precioso. Mira, me llama la atención que muchos geómetras que hemos entrevistado hablan de la inspiración de conectar con la naturaleza. Muchos hablan de la conexión con la naturaleza, la mirada al propio ADN y cómo también eso estaba reflejado en antiguas civilizaciones. Entonces, la gran pregunta que quiero hacerte es, cuando tú haces esta denominación de cosmometría, estás ampliando la medición de la Tierra hacia una ciencia universal. ¿Tú crees que la cosmometría o geometría sagrada es una ciencia universal?
This is beautiful, Marshall. I'm very interested to realize, it's very interesting to realize that many of the geometers that we've already interviewed, they speak about the inspiration that they get from nature and their own DNA, and how it's reflected also in old civilizations. And now you've picked this concept, cosmometry, which is basically reaching further. It's not just the measurement of the earth, and we're heading towards some sort of universal science. Do you believe cosmometry could be considered a universal science?
Beautiful question. I do believe that it is the basis for a universal science and a unification. It's part of the process of the unification of science, and it's universal, just as is true with using the name sacred geometry and the reference to that whole lineage from ancient to present, and how it's been found very much within the realms of sacred architecture and sacred iconography and symbolism. The reason being is that these are universal. And what we're understanding now is the the patterns we see, the geometries we see, the symbolic relationships we see, and then extending it into science, the ratios, the mathematics, the harmonic nature is revealing itself such that we are seeing what is a universal science. In a way, maybe for, not necessarily for the first time, because throughout science, there are universal principles, but I think in a way that's making it more whole and integrated and unified, then I feel like we're crossing a threshold, you know, from maybe separated sciences to seeing the universal unified nature of it all, very much through the geometry or the cosmometry, and then through the unified physics, specifically in my case, which I write about in the book, based on the Sim-Haramain's model of physics. That is very much unifying physics. And then, of course, the third component in the book is music, which is a harmonic system that organizes the universe that we discovered. We did not invent it. And so that becomes a universal science. And so, yes, I very much feel we're opening up to that at this time.
Y es muy bonito porque estábamos el otro día con una gran educadora de acá, de Latinoamérica, llamada Noemí Paimal, y ella decía que la educación del futuro completa se basa en la teoría del campo unificado que se revela a través de la geometría sagrada. Y por eso es tan importante enseñar esto desde los primeros años a la infancia. ¿Qué opinas tú de esto, de enseñar esto en la primera infancia para el ser humano?
Very beautiful. The other day we were talking to a great educator. She's participating in the summit, and she's called Noemi Paimal. And she was saying that the education of the future is based on this theory of the unified field, which is revealed through sacred geometry. And she was talking about how we should teach this knowledge basically in the first years. And what do you think about this? What if we taught sacred geometry or cosmometry on the first years of our life?
Yes, I agree fully with that. I feel that we're at the threshold of realizing a deeper understanding of the true nature of reality. And one that's based on a scientific understanding, as well as, of course, the spiritual, philosophical. And yet the scientific aspect is the one that the mind, our mental, logical mind, can come into understanding and alignment with our intuitive spiritual knowing. And when that happens, we become integrated and at another level, and our mind can finally relax instead of feeling confused and uncertain and wondering if it's true. The mind can suddenly become relaxed and integrated. And so I do feel that when we teach these ideas and these principles to starting at a young age, and that becomes the basis of understanding self, understanding nature, understanding the unified nature of our whole reality and consciousness itself as the basis of from where to grow, from children onward, it will make a profound difference in our world, and as well will be very empowering for the next generations to come, because their basis of understanding will just provide so much more from which then to become creative and innovative. And there's really, it's fundamentally very simple, this field of knowledge. It can get very complex and it seem overwhelming, and yet the basics are very simple. And so to teach the basics to the young ones, the kids, and then, let it grow from there, I think would be a very important and beautiful step to take.
Ojalá sea así. Ojalá sea así. Y me agrada mucho la palabra que utilizas, crecimiento. ¿Mm? Es, es quizás este conocimiento algo que es una semilla que luego crece en nosotros y se expande y se profundiza. Eh, ¿Cómo crees tú que este conocimiento sea tan fundamental en estos momentos, en el despertar de una nueva conciencia humana y, y en la visión de todas estas crisis que estamos viviendo los seres humanos?
I hope the same with regards to, you know, having this knowledge taught to the kids. I really like the word that you chose, development. This idea that this knowledge could be kind of planted as a seed within, and then from there it starts to grow and to become deeper. And then the question is, given all the crises that we're going through today, how is it that today is more fundamental to have this knowledge in order to awaken our new consciousness?
Yes. So you mentioned in your excuse me, in your in your question before, this other person you were interviewing talking about the recognition of the unified field. And that recognition is a very fundamental paradigm shift in the progression of our evolution in consciousness, as well as how it informs our beliefs, our behaviors, and our actions in the world. And we obviously are in a time where the paradigm that got us to this place, which has been very much based scientifically and philosophically, ethically, on a belief that everything is separated, disconnected, machine-like, not alive, other than the life we see around us, to now to really embracing this paradigm of understanding that, oh, in fact, it's fully unified everywhere, that matter, energy, and consciousness are all one thing. There's really only one thing going on. So then that informs how we see the world, how we see ourselves, how we see each other, how we see the world, how we interact, come into relationship with all of that. And more profoundly and importantly, what kinds of innovations we can pursue and bring into the world that bring us into a harmonic resonance with nature and the cosmos. And that's really the most important thing we need to do at this time, is harmonize ourselves, literally, technically speaking, in our biological systems, in relationship to the environment, through understanding that the unified field is a frequency, vibration, and resonance based field. And it's not difficult to understand how to come into resonance and harmony with that field. And so that is going to be what enables us to basically take a quick turn in the right direction to stabilize what is right now getting to be a critically unstable set of circumstances that we're in. So that's where I see how this field of knowledge can and will benefit our world, and is necessary, and very necessary to do so at this time.
En mi escuela de geometría sagrada, que está encargada de formar terapeutas, enseñamos que la sanación, la última sanación del ser humano es obtener la conciencia de unidad. Y cuando, te confieso, es un poco complejo para mí cuando muestro la geometría a mis alumnos, que en vez de pensar en la complejidad de la forma, puedan entrar en ver que la forma está enmarcando un vacío, un punto, que lo más importante es el vacío que contiene esa forma. La pregunta es, tú hablas mucho en tu libro sobre el punto cero, el vacío. ¿Qué es y cómo puede influir en nuestra vida cotidiana conocer y saber de esta información?
One second, sorry. In my school, my sacred geometry school, where I teach to basically have therapists come out of that school, I teach that the ultimate healing is to reach this consciousness of unity consciousness. Now, I must confess that it's very difficult for me to, every time I show geometry to my students, to let them transit through the form and the complexity of the form to what's beyond that. And the fact that the most important thing about this form or this shape, it's actually the emptiness of it. And what you've also called the 0 point. So you talk a lot about the 0 point. Can you explain to us what is the 0 point or the emptiness, and how can it influence or affect our lives?
So first I want to acknowledge the work you're doing and that intention for creating, people who can take this work out, and it's in a sense of as a therapist, with the understanding that bringing about awareness of the unity of all things is really the path to healing. And I fully agree with you. That's what enables us to return to wholeness, which is already present, always, and yet we distort it. And so to bring our minds and our emotions and our bodies to that place, I agree with you, is a very key aspect of what we call healing. So thank you for that work you're doing. In regards to that, there's a relationship between all form that we see, including the geometry that you showed, and everything that is manifest, and then what we then call the 0 point field. And a couple of ways to look at that. One is the geometric relationship, since you showed that geometric model. And in very simple terms for this conversation today, what Buckminster Fuller discovered is the geometry of equilibrium. It's a particular, I don't have a model here, but it's the only geometry where the vectors on it. Okay. I wouldn't be surprised. Yes, well, that's a more complex version.
Yes.
Yeah, that is in the center of that. That's fine, no worries. That's good. That helps because this will help. This is so this is the next level of that. There's the one next level simpler has 12 vectors from the middle coming out, and then the set of vectors on the outside that are all of the same length. The ones coming out from the center and the ones, yes, and that would be the spherical version of it exactly right there. That is called a vector equilibrium. Now, what's what Buckminster Fuller realized is the geometry of nothingness. So that everything else that we see manifest is fluctuating waveforms on either side of that 0 point. And so all energy tends to want to go back to that equilibrium state. And there's reasons that it won't, and actually it will move through that state and go past it and return to it and past it and return to it. Always, it's always happening. It always is crossing through that 0 point state. So that we can then see there's a relationship between the geometries that manifest crystals and atoms and molecules, and this, what Bucky Fuller called the reference, the 0 reference geometry. And that's very important because then you understand where the source pattern is that everything is in relationship to. And you also then can understand what unifies it all as the same common source. That's geometrically. And then just to say with the model, one model that you held up is that 64 tetrahedron model that Nassim Haramein discovered. That is like, that's the next fractal version of that. It's when you polarize, you take the first one, the vector equilibrium, and you polarize it, this is what you get. And there's some significant aspects to that. It's essentially, just to say quickly, it's the first iteration of mass and matter, energy forming into something we could actually observe after you leave the 0 point state. And it is still an equilibrium geometry, so it's directly related to that field. And then the other thing to say is, from the physics standpoint, especially what has been discovered by Nassim Haramein and has been written about in his papers, and his next paper that's coming soon is going to be the one that puts it all together across all scales in the universe.
Wow.
Yes, it's going to be quite something. And that's just to say that at the very, 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 very tiny, small scale called the Planck scale, much smaller than atoms and protons in atoms, way smaller at that scale, which is a reference scale that's used in all of physics, is where it appears that the energy dynamics want to settle into equilibrium, because there's a lot of, it's a very, very, very high energy state, just vastly huge energy state. And when you get that much energy and vibration, it tends to want to return back to that 0 point state. Now it's always fluctuating, and that's why they call it 0 point energy. And it's from that field of energy that all the rest of it fractally and harmonically becomes manifest, which is what Nassim is showing through his mathematics and how the whole model works. And so there you have now a physical relationship to the 0 point field. You understand the geometry of it, and with those understandings, you then can say, okay, that's how mass is rising. This is why the speed of light is what it is. This is how gravity works. And all of that makes sense. You now understand the source of all those things, and then how they're all actually the same thing. They're not different things. They're all just different ways of perceiving the same energy dynamics at different scales. And then you can begin to work with them and create technologies and applications that utilize those understandings. So that's really how the relationship between the 0 point field, the geometry you showed, and that emptiness, it's all one and the same thing.
O sea, como que hemos podido ahora definir la semilla primordial que representa el estado de conciencia que quizás los iluminados conectaban en un estado de trance, de meditativo, que nos conectaba con todas las cosas, ¿no? Y es también esto aplicable, como lo estoy viendo acá, a asuntos de estados de conciencia o asuntos biológicos también. Y la gente a veces se pierde, Marshall, porque lo vemos muy empeñado en la visión de la física, pero podríamos correlacionarlo a la vida cotidiana, ¿sí? a lo normal en nuestra vida.
So, from what I understand, we've kind of reached a definition for the primary or the original seed, and how it's also related, or how we could explain, for example, how some illuminated people in the past would have reached certain states of consciousness or some sort of trance states and meditations. And so the question is, through this understanding, these people might have been able to, or these states of consciousness, these people might have been able to understand how everything else was connected out there. Is this type of knowledge or understanding applicable to our daily lives? Because the way we understand it at the moment is basically based on biology and physics. How can we use this knowledge and understanding in our daily lives?
Yes. So the reference to those who have gone within through meditation, or going into transcendent states, is a good place to begin with that inquiry, because it immediately takes us into the relationship between our consciousness and our biology and energy and physics, the physical and metaphysical. And those who have gone into those states witness an aspect of the field, whether it might be the visual seeing of the geometry and the unity of all things. It may be a direct experience and direct knowing. It may be such a transcendent perspective that you see the entire universe laid out before you as one whole. There are many ways we can have those experiences. And when that happens, I believe that we are literally, we're witnessing that that unified state of being, not only of the universe, but ourself. We literally are directly witnessing who we are, what we are. And in regards to taking that into our daily lives, certainly practicing meditation, practicing techniques that can bring us to that state is a very important aspect of how we can engender not only the understanding but the embodiment of the unity of all things, and the direct experience and sharing in that experience of that unified state of being. In regards to how it relates to biology, the physics, the physical world around us, what is being understood, and this goes back, a long time in spiritual traditions, in the science, I would say most of the quantum physicists came to the realization that while there's the physical aspect of what they're studying, observing, theorizing about, they all came to realize that there's no way you could separate mind and consciousness from it.
Yes.
That would be illogical and not possible. Erwin Schrödinger and Max Planck and David Bohm went extensively into that. Einstein all said this. And in the contemporary understanding in unified physics, and in other fields that are emerging, or through other scientists and researchers who are heading in that direction, is realizing that what we call the physical universe and the biological system are all a manifestation of this one field from that one source that is a unified field of matter, energy, or you say mass, energy, and then information, which is the relationships of all of those things. That is so fully unified that all of that information of every part is present at every point. It's one hologram. And that consciousness, as we call it, is an inherent aspect of that field. It's not some strange offshoot that happened to come from our brains. It is actually the other way around. Our brains formed,
Comes.
and not only our brains, our heart, our gut, and our entire nervous system to be a fractal antenna as a receiver transmitter within this field of intelligence, awareness, consciousness that is everywhere. And it's a natural occurrence for that organization of the information and the energy and the matter to through the feedback loop aspect of it to inevitably come to what we call, yes, exactly, and to come to what we call consciousness. We experience as human consciousness is only one version of what's out there. And it's just a natural part of what already exists everywhere. So again, it's that one, there's only one thing happening. So the relationship between physical universe, biological system, mind, and consciousness is this one phenomenon. And that's a very important shift, because then it helps us to understand our relationship to biological systems, healing, vibrational medicine, consciousness, emotions, intelligence, all of that. And that's part of the paradigm shift that we're presently in at this time.
Es muy hermoso lo que dices, Marshall, porque es como regresar a casa, ¿no? Estar conectado con todo, ser parte de todo, refleja esta búsqueda, ¿no? de regresar a casa. Y creo que estás mostrándonos la manera de cómo podemos regresar a esta conciencia de unidad, donde ya no nos sentimos huérfanos. ¿Tú crees que esta visión sanadora es lo que realmente necesita la humanidad en estos momentos?
It's very beautiful what you're saying, Marshall, because it feels like coming back home. To be able to connect with everything and be part of everything. And so is this search around, how to get back home. And what you're showing us is how to get back to this consciousness of unity, not to feel orphans anymore. Do you believe that this healing vision is the way out, or the way, or what we need as human beings today in order to heal?
Yes, I very much do believe that this is the key to healing our problems in the world, our challenges. Our challenges are a result of the lack of understanding that, the lack of knowing that, and especially in large part the lack of embodying and bringing our actions into right relationship with that. Because that's lacking, we lack that understanding, and so our relationships are very distorted. They're very conflicted. And the wonderful thing is, when you go outside the human distortion field, a part of the field, and you look at nature, you look at the cosmos, yes, there's of course turmoil and change and what we might call violent interruptions. Generally speaking, when you look at it, it's very peaceful, it's very harmonious, it's very well organized, it's very much in right relationship. And so this understanding is what will enable us, as I was saying earlier, to orient ourselves to that which is already like you were saying, already home. You know, we're already home. We're already living in that place. We just forgot. You know, we're not having to find our way back. We're having to actually let go of that which makes us think we're not there, and embrace that which makes that which we know to be true, that we are already there. Nature is already in that state, and by then adopting this understanding and the embodiment of it in our lives, that will be what enables what we call the healing and the restoration. It's really a restoration of wholeness, rather than the fragmentation and the constrictions and conflicts. We orient towards that which is already here, which then becomes integrated and whole again, environmentally, in our human relationships, in our societies, in all the systems that we create. We have a model for it and an understanding, and that absolutely will be the key to the healing that's needed at this time. It's beautifully said. Thank you, Juan Pablo.
Thank you. Y para terminar, te quería, tú nombras en tu libro varias instancias donde tú pudiste como incorporar, como dices tú, esta información con cosas que te pasaron en tu vida. En tu libro mencionas el proceso, por ejemplo, de fluir y la geometría sagrada a través de la práctica del Aikido. ¿Cuáles fueron las lecciones que aprendiste y cómo se puede decirle a la gente cómo podemos hacer un Aikido, por así decirlo, al momento actual que estamos viviendo?
So to finish, in your book, you refer to many experiences that you've had in order to integrate this information in your kind of daily life. There's one particular thing that you refer to, which is this idea of flowing with Aikido and sacred geometry. What are the main lessons that you've learned from that experience? And how can we teach people to sort of Aikido this moment?
Yes, I love that.
and this particular moment, sorry, and I forgot to say that, this particular moment, like through this crisis that we're going through and everything.
Yes, yes. Well, I guess I'll begin with, for those who are not familiar with Aikido, what that is. It's a martial art created by a remarkable man back in the last century. So it's a very more of a modern martial art. I think it was in the 1940s, 1950s that Morihei Ueshiba in Japan, who was an absolute martial arts master, could not be defeated. He had transcendent spiritual experiences like we were talking about, and realized, you know, the direct experience of the unity as well as the harmony. And he came to realize that martial arts, that kind of mastery, is ultimately in service to creating harmony in the world. It's not about fighting. It's not about defeating an enemy. It's about defeating the enemy in yourself, so that when you take that mastery, you're in service entirely to harmonizing the world. Aikido, the word itself, I means harmony. Ki is the life force, like qi in Chinese. So, and then do is the practice. And so it's the practice of harmonizing with the life force, Aikido. And that as a principle of understanding itself can inform us of what you ask, you know, how do we Aikido this moment? And it's about practicing aligning ourselves harmoniously with the life force energy that is that which is making all this happen in the first place. And the relationship to then the flow aspect of that, like in an understanding of sacred geometry and cosmometry, and all of the physics of the universe, there's the relationship between the forms, like you held the geometries up, and they're very set, they're very rigid, and they look stable, and yet all of that is actually a continuous movement of energy, always. Nothing is ever static. And in the film Thrive 2, Kimberly Gamble, says, stillness is not still. Stillness is a state within a constantly moving system. And so there's a relationship there between that 0 point stillness and the continuous movement. And when we can hold ourselves in that still center point, in Aikido, one of the basic principles they teach is to center ourselves in the belly, in the dantian, that energy center in the belly, as the place from which then to move. And that's the center of the hurricane. And when you position your mind and coordinate your mind and your body and your energy in that point, and then you go into movement and you're interacting with, your opponent, your partner who you're practicing with, life around you that is throwing you challenges. It's movement of energy, all of it. And when we're centered and in that still point, we become stable, tremendously stable. If we were in person, I could show you just how much it instantly stabilizes you. And then with that stability, extremely powerful. And then with that principle of harmonizing, we take that stability and power and use it to take an incoming conflict, receive that conflict, redirect that conflict, and neutralize it, basically harmonize it, rather than hit it like that, try to push it away. In Aikido, you actually blend with it, receive it, redirect it, and harmonize it. And it's a beautiful martial art to watch, because it's all about spirals. And it's the torus, like you showed one time, the torus.
Yes,
that's all about being inside the torus and moving with that energy, and then applying that into the world. Like you said, how do we do Aikido this time in this crisis that we're facing? It's due to the same thing. We have to receive them fully. We can't be in denial. We can't. If we try to push them away, it's not going to work. We have to fully embrace with very intelligent understanding and acceptance, even though it can be very painful to really look at what's going on, and then receive and redirect, understanding our intention and goal is to harmonize it and neutralize it. And we, again, it's alignment with what's already occurring in the universe. And so there's the physical or the energetic physical embodiment. That is a very important practice to really orient ourselves into our belly. And there's another dantian here in the higher heart, and another one in the head. And when we orient ourselves, it stabilizes us. That's a great practice. I think also would be very beneficial to teach young children from early age to be able to center themselves like that. And then that, of course, then applies into how we're relating to the world around us, and then the principle of applying Aikidoing the world. That's really, it's really everything we're talking about here. So I love that you asked that question. It is dear to my heart, and I think it's a very important one to understand at this time. Yeah.
Amigo Marshall, ha sido un placer. Ojalá sigamos haciendo Aikido juntos y sigamos danzando en esta danza primordial cósmica que nos está invitando el mundo. Te doy las gracias desde este punto de la geometría del globo, y Yo creo que está todo el mundo muy agradecido por todo lo que has entregado hoy día. Muchísimas gracias.
My dearest friend, Marshall, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope that we can continue to do more Aikido together and to dance this primordial cosmic dance that the world is inviting us to dance. And thanks so much from this point of the geometry of the world. And I'm sure that everyone is so thankful for what you've shared today. And thank you so much again.
Gracias, Juan Pablo, Pamela. And to all that you're doing, thank you so much for inviting me to have this conversation with you and to explore how do we Aikido this together. And I especially love dancing together because I love to dance. And, you know, that's what's happening all the time in the universe. And when we actually just dance together and get in our joy and really live into our joy body together, it's the most beautiful thing. And I thank you today for choosing to do that with me and to do that together. And I know that we will continue, and I look forward to it very much. And it's just lovely to meet you both. And thank you for all you're doing to make this possible.
Muchas gracias, Marshall. Bueno, hemos llegado al final de esta conversación. Fue un agrado para mí, y estoy seguro que para todas las personas que están participando en esta cumbre. También fue maravilloso escucharte hablar sobre este tema tan interesante. Recuerden dejar sus comentarios en la plataforma y también en las redes sociales. Me puedes encontrar en Instagram como @jpuribebiogeometría, y nos vemos en otro encuentro en la cumbre.